Thank you for that welcome. First of all, as the chair of ISO TC211, so on behalf of my international and Korean colleagues, I would like to thank the Honourable Mayor for welcoming us to your beautiful city. Tomorrow we get a more chance to look around the city, but you have a wonderful campus here on which we've been able to meet so far. And a lot of the effectiveness of that meeting, I would like to thank the Ministry of Land Information and Transport and also LX for providing us with the technology we need nowadays with post-COVID, not so many people travelling. Everything depends on working virtually as well as in the room. So there's normally more people in our meetings who are away in other time zones. But it's not just technology, but the many helpful staff. You've given a lot of investment into our meetings, and we're very thankful for that. I'm going to talk a bit about ISO TC211, how we work and what we're trying to do. This one, I think. So our vision in ISO TC211 is this, that we want to support a sustainably prosperous future by providing a set of standards. But we don't do that by ourselves, providing in cooperation with others a set of standards to enable better management of geographic information. That's what we're about. And the way we plan and try to do that is really three strands. We've got collaboration, which we'll talk more about. We've got harmonization, so we have a continuous attempt to ensure that our standards work well together. And outreach, so making sure that, as was said several times today, a standard is a useless thing unless people know it's there and can make use of it. So we are, internally, we collaborate. We're an international committee. We're the blue countries are the active participating members. You can see the white areas, well, not so much on that screen, but you can see we're short of members from South America and from most of Africa. We are well represented in East Asia as well as Europe and North America. And the small diagram on the right is just to give an idea of who it is from different countries who are leading the activity. So you can see flags there from Europe, from North America, but very much from East Asia, where we have several important contributors to our work from Korea, also from Japan, China, Australia. And that their time is provided by many supporting organisations. So ISO TC211, in a sense, we rely on voluntary work. So everybody, myself included, has a day job and provides their time, usually at the cost of their employer. But I would say thank you as well to we have a few people who, even though they've retired, still working with us, and thank you to those who are no longer supported by their employer, except by getting a pension, I suppose. But what we do, so we recognise that most of what we do now works in IT. So there are a set of IT standards that are, to some extent, come from ISO and IEC, but the web standards developed by the Internet Engineering Task Force and the World Wide Web Consortium, those are important standards for the way we share data nowadays. They form a foundation. Now, we do also have some foundation that we create ourselves, because we have some standards that aren't about IT. They're about geodesy, how do you fix where you are in the world? And we say, no, that's our subject. We don't depend on IT. Well, we depend on some IT equipment to do the job, but come to us for that expertise. And we have some standards that actually relate to hardware, to sensors as well. But mostly we're about data management, distributing data as information, and so we build on that common IT, which is always changing, but we try to build on it. And then there's ourselves and OGC, who you heard from earlier, who build specifically geospatial standards. And we do that to provide a common foundation. So as Scott said earlier, that if you define yourself a polygon and you implement it in an Oracle database and in an open source database and a Microsoft database, it should be the same polygon because there's a standard. And that is one of the standards that people almost forget exists. It just is there doing its thing. So we make that, in our world, we think of that as a second layer of standardizing the geospatial aspects of things. How do we know where we are in the world, and how do we represent well, I talk about the shape there, but we recognize that not everything is represented in shapes. I'll come to that. And then domain organizations build standards on top of ours. That's the way we look at it. OGC has some domain standards. We tend not to have many, a little bit. but other organisations do standardisation, say for maritime navigation from the International Hydrographic Office, or for weather forecasting from the World Meteorological Organization. And those organizations both build on the same geospatial framework, which makes it easier for them to interact with each other, as well as easier for them to be understood by generic software. So a lot of that requires that collaboration. So these are just a few of our collaborative partners. You see OGC on there. DigiWig is the Defence Geospatial Information Working Group, so they're a domain to do with military, to do with defence. Some UN organisations like the Food and Agriculture Organisation and the Universal Postal Union to do with addressing. So there we've worked with them. They know the demand in that area. We help them with the standardisation process. I talked before about the fact that you build on IT, it's always changing. So both OGC, TC211 are organisations that are 25 years old. That's not as long ago as I studied computing. When I tell my family and their friends that when I studied computing at university, they hadn't invented the World Wide Web. They tend to be a bit surprised, but that's youngsters for you. Technology has changed, and we have to keep changing our standards to keep up with those changes in IT. So that's the top right corner there. There are also what we think of as new domains, so new ideas of how to use that data. We heard earlier about intelligent transport or autonomous vehicles. They're not the same thing, but they're two areas where there's rapidly emerging technology which places different demands on the geospatial data. We've heard a lot about digital twins, particularly urban digital twins. They're fairly recent phenomena. And I've typed it wrong in there, perhaps analysis-ready data, so the idea that you don't just provide data that someone can study hard and work out on their GIS system, and then next week they'll give you the answer, but you provide data that's ready for being scripted to produce the result in near real time. That's a challenge for us that we're just starting to work on. On the other side, you see that the whole ISO organization is also modernizing because they realize that one of the disadvantages of being a long, well-established organization is that you built your processes in a day of sort of book publication. And so far, they've modernized them maybe to PDF file publication. What ISO Smart is, I've written it out there because it's not a normal use of that acronym. But what ISO are working towards is standards that are machine applicable, readable, and transferable. So that's saying instead of there being a document for a person to read and implement, to what extent can they make standards which machines can automatically implement? And there's been some progress in this, for example, in earth-moving machinery, where there are existing standards, some from OGC, where you can design what you want the machine to do and then download the instructions, and an autonomous digger will go and move the earth into the right places for you. And it's machine-readable data based on a standard. Can we go one further and give a machine-readable standard? So we've put forward a number of use cases into that project, and so have many other ISO technical committees, particularly around machine tools and engineering. But we've put forward one around terminology, one around the way we do data modeling, and also some around the way we validate data. Admittedly, that's a little old school, but it could be transferred to more new technologies. We don't know yet whether they're going to use our use cases or other people's, but we remain engaged with the ISO Smart project. And the other aspect, just in making the publication of standards more efficient, is a thing called the Online Standards Development Tool, where we're one of the forerunner committees in helping ISO look at better ways to collaborate in creating standards documents. We were just talking this morning about how, because that in itself, I mean, to some extent, that standard is already machine readable, we can generate more artifacts out of it that can be used in generic IT environments. So we talked a lot before how our main collaborative partner is OGC. Here's a bit of an example of some of, I don't think it's complete, but some of the common foundation we have to ensure that our standards have a lot of commonality. Not all our standards, not all the OGC standards, but a reasonable number of them, where you've got documents that are the same, and these are all in what OGC calls the abstract specification, the underlying framework of how they make standards. Current joint activities with OGC include the modernization of the APIs. We are accepting that OGC have much more of that innovative process. So once they've matured something and demonstrated that it works, we fast track it to be also an ISO standard. The second one on there is now published, but there's another standard which we've worked on jointly for quite a few years. And then more recently, we're working on a standard to make machine-readable data quality measures. So instead of it being a document that tells you what positional accuracy means, there'll be a nugget of data that tells a computer what positional accuracy means. And ISO have entered an agreement with OGC that they will manage that register. So they'll make those pieces of machine-readable data publicly available next year. So it takes us a while to build these things. And on analysis-ready data, as we said. But those are all actually going to result in standards that are kind of common between us. There's some generic subjects where we're working jointly on things like improving the document production, on better ways to publish vocabulary. So we work a lot with OGC, and we're very thankful for their innovation program that can feed us, because in that sense, we just concentrate on the standardization part. And we also do a lot of work with and for the United Nations, so there's another big area of collaboration. I won't read all of them here, but you can see projects there with the UN GGIM, particularly in geodesy, and with the FAO and so on. In the past, we've done work with the World Bank, and with WMO, it's a little bit more remote at the moment. They just take our standards and OGC standards and implement them. We do a lot of work with other organizations too, with other ISO committees, and with professional bodies like the Federation of International Geodesists and the International, I got my wrong G's in that one, FIG and IAG. Some of you will know what the difference is. I'm sorry, I should. Skips my mind. Also with the European Commission, who are quite forward-looking in terms of data management. And as Scott mentioned earlier, with CEOS and OGC on this analysis ready. So we like to say, so OGC gets people into their own domain working groups. We're not saying that's a wrong thing to do, and we should probably do more of it, but we actually try and spend time getting the organizations to sort out the requirements, and then we come alongside them to work on the standards. I thought I'd go through a few of the other things that are current activities. Sorry, ISO loves its numbers for everything, and these are just the numbers and titles of standards. But we're actually in this process of revising a lot of our core standards, and I talked about catching up with the way IT has changed. So the way we use UML, Universal Modeling Language, is changing to catch up with some changes there. Some of these are to do with lessons learned. Some of them, that's core standards. Some of these current projects are about adopting newer technology, whether that's JSON, open APIs, smart terminologies, so on, and geopositioning, where technology is changing quite fast. And then we talked a bit about newer domains. And this is where there's a lot going on that's based in East Asia. So these three projects are led in Korea, China, and Korea and Australia, I think, working together. So a lot of the thinking about the standardization of urban digital twins is coming from this side of the world, which is encouraging to me. So yes, that's me. If you get the slides afterwards, there are links that you can use.